More prelim notables. All right.
Cool.
That was awesome. So this card is absolutely stacked. There's a lot that we could talk about here, right? Like we've got Chris Curtis fighting Joaquin Buckley. That's a fight that I'm looking forward to. I'm a huge fan of both of these guys. Just in case you're a little bit unfamiliar, Joaquin Buckley, probably one of the greatest knockouts of all time, when he got his kick caught and then spun back around, right on the chin with the other foot. Chris Curtis, the action man, had a little bit of a disappointing fight his last time out against Jack Hermanson, but this fight absolutely promises action. I personally can't pick it. I do have a slight feeling that maybe this fight goes a little bit longer than anybody would expect, potentially going to a decision rather than being ended early, because of the respect that both of these men have for each other's power. I think that might lend to a slightly longer fight. Maybe if you see this come in at over or under 1.5 rounds, I would snatch the over in that easily. But both of these men could put the other guy out. So, but it's going to be a great fight. Both of them respect each other's power. It's going to be such a sick matchup. Do you have a pick for this one, or are you just excited to watch it like I am?
Yeah, I'm excited to watch because we've been raving about Chris Curtis, and he's been doing really well, except for his fight against Jack Hermanson. And even in that fight, there was just a lot of nothing going on. It wasn't like Chris Curtis got dominated in any particular fashion of the fight. So it's going to be really interesting to watch him go in there against a guy who's going to bring it. And was just on the Joe Rogan podcast and talked about his upbringing in fighting, and that he has a wrestling background, and that he really enjoys going on YouTube and learning the craft and learning really interesting moves on YouTube and putting it into practice. And now he's finally with a gym. And up until, 1 or 2 fights ago, he really was just kind of a nomad and with an old camp. And so it's going to be really interesting at 28 years old to see what Joaquin Buckley brings to the table against a 35-year-old Chris Curtis. Now, these guys are largely the same build, having, according to Tapology, only a half-inch reach difference. That's going to Joaquin Buckley. I don't know which way I'm going to go. Because it's just so largely unknown. You're going to expect Chris Curtis to bounce back in what's more of a traditional stand-up boxing style, with not too heavy on the kicking aspect of it. Really strong grappling game and ability to keep it standing if he needs to. And then Joaquin Buckley is going to have the wrestling. Is he going to be able to take Chris Curtis down? Is he going to go there? He's going to be not the longer guy. So he does have those interesting kicks. It's going to be really, really interesting. I'm excited to watch it. If I had to pick, I might lean towards Chris Curtis just because he's going to be a little bit fresher. He's Joaquin Buckley's coming off of that Nasruddin Imavov loss by decision just 2 months ago. So for that reason, I think that's going to be the tiebreaker for me. I'm going to go with Chris Curtis, but it is a very, very close fight here, and I'm really excited to watch it.
Yeah, I would definitely have to lean Chris Curtis as well. He's got really good takedown defense. We've seen that a few times since he was signed by the UFC. He knows he reads takedowns really well and just sprawls and gets his hips out of the way very, very quickly. So I'm a huge Chris Curtis fan. I'm a huge fan of Buckley as well. And you want to talk about Buckley being a nomad. He did just have Dale from Detroit Urban Survival Training in his corner
Right.
not even 2 fights ago, right? I hope that Dale makes his return, because I think Buckley actually won that fight too.
I do remember, that he was in the corner and the fighter did end up winning. So,
Yeah.
I mean, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, bring him back. Yeah, that guy Dale is a character. We haven't really seen him. He's kind of faded into obscurity again, but
A little bit.
maybe he'll make a new career as opposed to urban survival training. Then he'll become a mixed martial artist coach.
I mean, I don't know if that's serious or not, but I mean, if it's like what do you call it?
Steven Seagal.
No, well, yes, I didn't even think about that, but yes. But if that's him just kind of being if he's joking around and making a mockery of that, I think he's doing a good job. I think that's funny. You know what I mean? If it's I can't even pull the word out. I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue.
Satire.
Yes, if it's satire, if it's sarcastic, I think that's really funny. If it's serious, then maybe that's a little bit questionable. But really interesting. Speaking of interesting, OSP is going to be on this card. Raul Rosas Jr., the 18-year-old, is going to be on this card, and you got the return of Billy Quarantillo. Those are all really, really good fights. Which one of those are you most looking forward to?
Probably Raul Rosas. Highly touted prospect coming onto the scene at 18 years old, youngest fighter on the roster now. That's an exciting one. And then I'm a big Billy Q fan. Not confident enough to pick him, but I do like some Billy Quarantillo every now and then. And I'm excited to see him come back. It's been a while. So all those fights, I'm looking forward to all of them. How about you? Which one are you most looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm a big Billy Q guy, especially coming off of that fight with Shane Burgos. That was a really, really difficult fight, really interesting fight because Shane is gonna enjoy standing up and boxing, using a little bit of the legs and negating your ground game, but he's got it if it goes there, and that's where Billy Q really shines is on the ground and his control, especially his back take. So having that fight with Shane Burgos, it shows the level of competition that Billy Quarantillo can compete with. So that was a really good fight. He's starting to get up there a little bit in age. Billy the Kid, Billy Q, but now he's 34 years old, almost like that Wonder Boy quality. It's weird to think that he's only 5 years younger than Wonder Boy Thompson. All right, that's not fair. He's 34 in 2 days. Wonder Boy's going to be 40 in February, so not fair. Closer to 6 years, but either way, he's taking on Alexander Hernandez, the Great Ape. Just coming off that submission loss against Renato Moicano 9 months ago. Not going to negate that too much, but I think there's a susceptibility there. But ultimately, I don't think there's going to be a finish here. I think this is probably safest bet of going to decision because of how durable both of these fighters are. So that's what I'm looking forward to most with Billy Q, because he's obviously going to do the most at this point. He's the most exciting when we talk about getting towards the belt. Raul Rosas, it's just interesting to see him fight against Jay Perrin, who's on a two-fight skid. I think both of them are actually in the UFC, if I can remember correctly. Yeah, both of them. Mario Batista lost a unanimous decision, and Richie Lang lost a tight unanimous decision. Don't overlook Jay Perrin here, but just interesting to see what Raul Rosas is going to look like. 5 of his fights, you're against an 0-2 Andreas Pocatorente, 2-0 Jose Guadalupe Penzola, 1-0 Francisco Villanueva, 0-0 Joel Pena, and then even the guy he beat, Mandel Gutierrez, 7-1, I think was also like about 24, 25 years old. So still on the younger side too. So interested to see what he's going to do against a 29-year-old Jay Perrin, who's been in the UFC for 2 fights. This will be his 3rd. I don't want to lay any money on this whatsoever because it's just so unknown. Not only is he making his UFC debut, but he's 18 years old. Who has any idea what's going to happen there? But definitely worth a watch. And then, OSP, you never know when it's going to be the final fight for him. He's back on the card against a guy named Antonio Tricoli. His most recent fight is in Brazilian Fighting Alliance, I think it is. I can't even really make it out here, but 1 year ago, not a highly rated. He lost his contender series. It was no. He won by decision, but it ended up going to what do you call it? Ended up being overturned to a no decision. That was 3 years ago. And then last year, he fought on a regional promotion, got the win by submission. Haven't heard from him since. And now he finds himself fighting OSP. OSP kind of on a skid himself. Just got that bounce back against Shogun Rua split decision. I think this is a little bit suspect on the UFC's part. I would have to imagine they're maybe bringing somebody in to make sure that OSP can get the win on maybe his last fight. Can't confirm that or whatnot, but because of the just kind of unknowns about this Antonio Tricolo Malvado guy, I'm staying away from it betting wise.
Yeah. They just brought this guy down from the clouds, and they're like, "Here, fight OSP." Like it's either a sacrifice or, well, it's a sacrifice one way or the other. Like either OSP is being sacrificed to this brand new hot prospect that nobody has heard about.
Who's fought twice in the last 3 years.
That nobody has heard about. Yeah. And maybe like, Hunter Campbell saw him in a street fight and was like, "Hey, this guy's good. Let's get him." More likely than not, though, they're sacrificing him to OSP to, like you said, give him that nice little retirement fight. The fight against Shogun Rua was disappointing, not really entertaining. So, you give a guy who had a really a great career up until a few years ago, you give him a nice farewell fight like they've tried to do with a couple of these legends over the past year or so. So That makes a lot of sense. One fight I'm really looking forward to, and I do have a pick for this one, is Biggie Boy Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Chris Daukaus. And both of these guys are on 2-fight losing streaks. But I think the Daukaus brothers at this point, like you have your theory about siblings in sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for a little bit there, it looked like maybe Chris Daukaus was the better brother. And then it looked like maybe Kyle. And then it switched back and forth. And now both of these guys, both Daukaus brothers, are maybe looking like they don't belong in the UFC. Like, I think maybe Chris Daukaus might have to go back to being a cop in Philadelphia after this fight, because you can only lose so many fights in the UFC before they say adios. Maybe the heavyweight division's a little bit different. They do have guys like Jared Vanderas still around. So, so you and I were talking about it. Somehow Jared Vanderas is a black belt, but that's a discussion for another time. But anyways, it's starting to get a little scary for Chris Daukaus in his career here. So maybe he doesn't belong in the UFC, and that'll be determined really tomorrow, because Rozenstruik seemed to be like that kind of guy for a little bit there, where you could rely on him to go 1 loss, 1 win, 1 loss, 1 win for his past maybe 6 or 7 fights. Now he's on a 2-fight skid. I think he's going to bounce back with another W this week. I think he's just a far superior kickboxer than Chris Daukaus. Chris Daukaus isn't really the grappler the way that his brother is. He prefers to keep things standing. Jairzinho Rozenstruik is much better at throwing things from range than Chris Daukaus is. And then when he chooses to, he can close the distance really well against Chris Daukaus, and land a couple shots in tight. I think all of Jairzinho Rozenstruik's UFC victories have come by way of knockout. And Chris Daukaus, I believe his last 2 losses have been by knockout.
They have been.
So that chin's starting to get a little shattered. Time after time, you keep taking those shots there. As we know, it just becomes easier and easier to knock you out. So I expect Jairzinho Rozenstruik, play his game a little bit from distance, throw a couple of those front kicks to the body, and then, just get in there real close, real tight, very fast, and land a couple good shots on the chin of Chris Daukaus and potentially put him to sleep. What do you got for that one? You like that one?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Jairzinho Rozenstruik is in a fight here where he's going to have the reach advantage. He's going to have the overall strength advantage. He's starting to look a little bit more solid, a little more blocky coming in at 259 in his last fight versus the Chris Daukaus, and like you were saying before, like the Tai Tuivasas of the world and the guys who walk around with that little bit of extra, fat on them. Although Chris Daukaus has been definitely adding muscle, those guys who are a little bit flabbier are definitely not the cream of the crop as we're starting to see. So I think Jairzinho Rozenstruik, with his history of being a really good kickboxer and now having the reach advantage in his last fight against, Alexander Volkov, Volkov's going to have the reach advantage there, and especially this, beefed up, filled out Volkov. He's going to come in there and he's actually, much improved. He's head hunting and he throws with a lot of power. So that loss to Volkov is going to be one that I'm not going to take too heavily against Jairzinho Rozenstruik, because you just look at the style matchups. You have a Chris Daukaus who's going to come in and strike with him. It's a little bit more of a boxing style. And could sometimes grapple, but it depends on who it is. I don't think there's going to be too much grappling going on here. Chris Daukaus, had those 2 knockouts, and a lot of what his fighting style relied on is a strong chin. And the fact that it's already started to crack here, we saw 2 back-to-back times, one against Curtis Blades, and then the other time against Derek Lewis, the first time was against Derek Lewis, which is understandable. And then you follow that up with a loss to Curtis Blades. I think Jairzinho Rozenstruik has the ability to put him out. I think Chris Daukaus could, definitely. I think it's a longer chance that Chris Daukaus is going to finish Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And I think, potentially a decision could go to Chris Daukaus because he's going to be a little bit more active here. But ultimately, I think if he's throwing, Jairzinho is just going to find an opportunity and land and get the win here.
Yeah, that's a big part of it too, is like which Jairzinho Rozenstruik are we going to see? But the biggie boy that comes off of a loss is typically the one that's more active in the octagon and more willing to get in there and throw. When we see him come off of a win, a lot of those times is when he's like more sit back and be patient. So as long as we get the aggressive biggie boy, which I'm thinking we will, then it'll be a nice potential knockout win for Jairzinho Rozenstruik over Chris Daukaus. That's my only prelim I mean, I actually feel like this one could be a lock. I feel pretty good about it. But that's my only like prelim notable, so to speak. Do you have any more for us before we go on to our main card?
Yeah, I do have one more. But just one quick thing is that Jairzinho Rozenstruik is sitting at -170. So if you could probably get closer to even or plus money if you go for him on the KO, and then obviously it's only going to get juicier if you get more specific. But -170 is a pretty good bet, especially for how comfortable I feel with it. Edmen Shahbazyan is taking on Dalcha Liang Gambula, and I just like Edmen Shahbazyan a lot better in this fight. He's 25 years old, so he is constantly improving, but his last 3 fights, he's on a 3-fight skid for about 2 years now. He had the loss to Derek Brunson, which exposed his ground game that is not quite up to par. And then Jack Hermanson, again, similar thing. And then Nasruddin Imavov gave him those, TKO elbows from the crucifix. I think Edmen Shahbazyan was just thrown into the fire a little bit premature. Having Ronda Rousey in his corner and singing his praises as someone with a judo background like her is definitely going to get you, that inflation in your notoriety and sometimes in your skill. So I think he was thrown in there with the best, but he does have wins over against Jack Marshman and Brad Tavares, a knockout over Brad Tavares. So, you can't overlook that. Dalcha Gambula is coming in here with losses over Marc-Andre Barriol, Cody Brundage, he got submitted by, and Punalehe Soriano Puna. He was knocked out just 4 months ago. I think ultimately, because Dalcha Liang Gambula is not going to have that big of a reach advantage here, he's only going to have a 2-inch reach advantage. He is only standing 5'8", and Edmen is 6'2". I just don't think that we've seen, outside of Nasruddin Imavov's crucifix elbows, a real chin issue for Edmen Shahbazyan, and that was a year ago. He's 25 years old. He knows what he has to work on in order to achieve what he wants to achieve in the sport. In a striking game, I don't think Dalcha Liang Gambula is going to be much of one to take him down. I think Edmen Shahbazyan is going to have the reach, or he's not going to have the reach advantage, but I think he's going to be a little bit more technical. I think he's going to be a little bit more powerful, and I think he has a lot more of an opportunity to put his skills on display here. And I think he actually knocks out Dalcha Liang Gambula. Like I said, he was knocked out by Punale Soriano not too long ago. And, the submission finished by Cody Brundage after getting hurt badly in that fight. I like Edmen Shahbazyan to go out there and right the track here. So that's another one for me as far as, again, I don't know if any of these I would call locks. Even Edmen Shahbazyan sitting here is -295, so fairly solid, fairly strong favorite. But, anything can happen in the UFC. So.
Yeah, I like the pick though. That's a solid pick. All right, so main card. You ready?